try to sort of gracefully head over to my PowerPoint, which I've never managed to do. So hopefully I'll be able to do it this time. Mm. All right, well, here we are. As I mentioned before, this is MEFA's Financial Aid 101 presentation, typically given out to families with seniors in high school heading to college next year. But, if anyone is here for their kids in earlier grades, that's great too. You can connect with MEFA in all the various ways. This is our social media information. You may want to follow us as we're always posting information on this process in lots of different ways. So we have podcasts, we have Instagram posts and tweets and articles that we post on Facebook as well as to our website. And by scanning the QR code, this will take you to our email sign up. We'll send you 1 or 2 emails a month with content that is going to be relevant to you based on the age of your student or students. So just all the different ways that you can connect with MEFA. After this presentation, there's going to be a lot of information in this PowerPoint. You'll have a lot of questions after today, between now and the time when your students step foot on campus as students. And we are a free resource for you throughout that time. So after today, we're here for you to help you with any questions that you might have. I think we're all probably familiar how to participate with a Zoom webinar by now, but just to let you know that if you do have questions, you can submit them through the Q&A, and this is why my colleague Jennifer is here to answer those questions as you have them. You can type them in and she will answer them. Also, this live transcript is available, so if you want to have the live transcript printed as I'm speaking, you can do that as well. So the chat feature is disabled, so we won't be able to communicate that way. But again, if you have a question, use the Q&A. Now, before we get started in with the actual content itself, I want to tell you a little bit about MEFA. If you're not aware, MEFA is the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, and we were created by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts back in 1982 with a public service mission, essentially to help families to plan, save, and pay for college and career training. So we do that in a variety of ways. I mentioned some of them already. You can visit the website, you can sign up for our emails, you can follow us on social media for all sorts of free guidance. Everything that we do through our bench of college guidance experts is free. So again, free resource for you to use. We also do savings programs. We manage the Massachusetts 529 plan as well as the prepaid tuition plan, and offer fixed interest rate educational loans as well. So that's who MEFA is. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to start off by talking about the types and sources of financial aid. So when we say financial aid, what is it that we're talking about and where does it actually come from? And then we'll talk about the application process. So how do you go about getting some of that financial aid that's out there, the various applications you need to file for them. Once those applications are filed and the college or the government is taking a look at those applications, how do they decide how much financial aid you're actually eligible to receive and how much you will receive? So we'll talk about that. And then I would say, I've been working for MEFA for over 20 years, and the most common question that I get from parents and from students is, how do people do this? Parents about to send their kids to college. How do other families do it? We'll talk about how people pay for college. Once you have a financial aid offer there from colleges and you have a balance due, what are some ways that people pay that balance? And then once again, just to stress this will be a long time between now and the beginning of college for your students. It is natural to have questions. You will have questions. You may feel overwhelmed at certain points, but just know that there is free help available. MEFA is a resource, a free resource for you. There are others, and we'll go over some of those free resources as well. Okay. Now, just to give you a little introduction as far as like trends in the financial aid landscape. A lot of you may be aware, or some of you may be aware, that last year, something happened with the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's the federal government form that you need to file to get financial aid from the federal government, from the states, and a lot of times from the colleges themselves. And we'll talk about that form in more detail. But last year, there was a FAFSA overhaul to simplify the FAFSA so more folks would be able to file it. The good news is the FAFSA is much simpler. But unfortunately, what happened last year is that the rollout was a bit of a challenge. So we had a lot of delays, a lot of technical issues with the FAFSA. So deadlines were delayed. People were not able to file. It caused a lot of stress. This year should be different, should be better. We have a year behind us. A lot of the problems were fixed. Not too many changes since last year. So we'll talk about this a little bit more, but last year you may have heard some rumblings about the FAFSA, and that's essentially what that was about. This year should be better. As college costs have continued to rise, and some of them are nearing that $100,000 a year mark, there's just been a bigger discussion about college affordability. And so people are going to have to start taking that into account sooner in the process when they're looking at what colleges they want to apply to. They're necessarily, I think, taking a look at cost and looking at some other pathways, including gap years or perhaps less expensive colleges, community colleges, or not college. So that is something that's happening. And again, this sort of melds with the third point. Creating a balanced college list will give you more options to choose from. So you want to make sure that you have a balanced list in terms of prices. The good news is that at the state level, there's a lot more financial aid available due to some changes at the state financial aid level, and we'll talk about that near the end of the presentation, some new programs and some expansions of existing programs. And then we're going to talk a lot, mostly actually, about need-based financial aid. So, they look at your finances and see how much aid you're eligible for based on that. That's called need-based financial aid. Merit aid, scholarships continue to be an important part of the financial aid offer. We'll talk about that in general too. Okay, types and sources of financial aid. What is financial aid? Well, essentially, it's money to help students pay for college. And that sounds simple, but it comes in three main varieties. The first, grants and scholarships. This is the best kind of financial aid that there is. It's gift aid. Doesn't have to be repaid. So it's granted to the student or given to the student, and it just comes off the bill. So hopefully when you see your financial aid offers for your colleges, you'll see a lot of gift aid represented there. The second type of financial aid is federal work study. And that is money set aside for a student to be able to earn by working a job on campus. So you see your financial aid offer from a college. Again, let's hope there are grants there or scholarships there. You may see federal work study will have a dollar amount attached to it. What that means is that amount of money is the amount that the student can earn over the course of the year by working a work study job. So if they want that money, if you want them to have that money, what they need to do is find a work study job and then work the hours, and they would get paid in a paycheck just like any other job throughout the course of the year. Now, different colleges do this in different ways. Most of the time, I think colleges sort of blast out a listing of work study jobs to their work study students so they can go and apply and work those hours and get the funds. Some may not do that. So if you're interested in work study and you have questions on what the next steps are, reach out to your financial aid office. Because if you don't find a work study job, even if you were awarded the money and work the hours, you don't get that work study offer. So if you're interested, you have questions, follow up. Now, if you don't get a work study offer, but you still want to work a job on campus, you can do that. There are jobs on campus that are not work study jobs, so students can do that. But that's the second type of financial aid. And finally, federal student loans are the third. And people get sort of confused about why loans are considered financial aid. And so this refers to one specific program. I don't mean MEFA loans. They're not financial aid. Loans from a bank, that's not financial aid. This one particular program called the Federal Direct Student Loan Program, those and those only are considered financial aid because they have incentives and benefits and discounts associated with them that that other loans don't have, and we're going to talk about it in just a minute. But those are the three main types: grants and scholarships, the best kind, federal work study, and federal student loans. So again, I said we're going to talk about federal student loans, and here we are. One of the benefits of federal direct student loans, and I'll just say this sort of off the bat, the only thing that MEFA suggests everybody should do, and so because we don't typically see that as our role, we see our role as giving you the information and letting you make the best decision for yourself. But one recommendation that we do give everybody is that if you are going to be borrowing anything at all for college, that you start by taking these loans first, as they are the only loans that are considered financial aid. And some of the reasons are as followed. So the student is the sole borrower on these loans. And this surprises people sometimes when they're heading off to college or their students are heading off to college. Since we tend to talk about student loans and student debt, and you hear stories in the news about students graduating with a lot of debt, a lot of people think that students can just borrow whatever it is that they might need to pay for college in their own name, as long as they promise to pay it back after college. But that's usually not the case. Typically, the only loans that undergraduate students can get in their own name without a co-applicant are these federal direct student loans, because there's no credit check to be approved for them. Now, because of that, there's only a certain amount that students can borrow every year. So this is on the right. Freshman year, students can borrow $5,500, sophomore year, $6,500, and then junior and senior year, $7,500 each. And that is part of the financial aid offer. Now, another benefit is a portion of these loans at least may be subsidized by the federal government while the student is in college. What does that mean? Well, when the student is in class, in college, enrolled, they're not expected to be making payments on these loans while they're students, right? Those loans are said to be in deferment until the students graduate. So repayment starts 6 months after the student graduates or leaves the program or falls below halftime. And so during that deferment time for a subsidized loan, there's no interest accruing on that. For an unsubsidized loan, there would be interest accruing on that in deferment. So it depends on your financial need if you qualify for a subsidy. But again, these are pretty much among the only loans, at least, that subsidy is an option for. The interest rate is 6.53% for the loans for the upcoming year, and that is fixed. So these loans for the upcoming year will always be at that 6.53%. They're not going to fluctuate with the market. Now for next year, so if you're getting a freshman year loan, it would be 6.53%. Next year, sophomore year loan might be different. And that would be fixed at its own fixed interest rate. Now, to me, the big benefits of these loans are their flexibility in repayment. So again, the students are not required to make any payments while they're enrolled in school. If they go on to graduate school, you can put them back into an in-school deferment. If you take all of the loan money that you're eligible to receive through these programs, so your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year loan limits, you're probably going to graduate with around $27,000 in debt in the student's own name. Now, the standard repayment term to pay that back is 10 years. So if you're borrowing $27,000, you're taking 10 years to pay it back. Around this interest rates, this will be anywhere about $300 to $350 a month for a monthly payment, roughly. If that's manageable, then great. If you'd like it to be lower, then there are options you can choose to get that monthly payment lower and make the payment as low as 10% of your discretionary income every month. Stretch that repayment term out to 20, 25 years. There are public service loan forgiveness options that you can take advantage of. So if you're graduating and you're on one of those one of those income-based repayment plans that last 20 or 25 years, you can, if you're working for a qualified nonprofit or a 501c3, after 10 years of payments, you can have the balance of your loans forgiven. So that's an option with these loans. hardship deferment and forbearances are also an option. So all of these things make these particular loans the best options for students. So again, if you're going to be borrowing anything, the student should start by taking these loans first before looking to outside sources. Speaking of sources, the sources of financial aid. So where does financial aid come from? We've already talked a lot about the federal government. So the federal government does a lot of financial aid. So aside from those federal student loans that we were just mentioning, they actually do work study. So they allot work study money to the universities, and the universities can then sort of decide who gets funds from the work study program. You may have heard of the Pell Grant. That's a federal grant program that's available. And there are tax credits that you can claim for paying tuition as well. The website for all of the federal government aid programs is studentaid.gov. Now, the state that you live in also will give out financial aid. Of course, ours is Massachusetts, so that represents programs like the Mass Grant Program, the John and Abigail Adams Tuition Waiver Program, the Mass No Interest Loan, the Koplik Scholarships. These are all examples of state-based financial aid. And you qualify for both federal and state aid by filing your FAFSA. And again, we're going to talk about that later on, but that's the free application for federal student aid. And it's part of why that form is so important. Aside from the federal government and the state governments, the colleges and universities give out a lot of financial aid as well. And they give out a lot of gift aid. So a lot of grants and scholarships come from the universities. Some colleges have their own loan programs. It's rarer than the grants and scholarships, but it does happen. And then there are outside agencies as well, of course, that provide scholarships. So national organizations, national companies offer scholarships. To search for them, you can go online, go to a scholarship search engine, create a profile, only use free scholarship search engines, never pay to have one of those done. You can go to MEFA.org, and we link to a few referenced here, fastweb.com, MEFApathway.org, which is our college and career portal, also has a scholarship search. And basically the student would create a profile in their own name, and then based on that profile, they would be filtered scholarship opportunities that they could apply for. That's national scholarships. For local scholarships, so from local businesses or organizations, have the student talk to their high school counselor. They usually have the most up-to-date information on the availability of local scholarships. Now, I like to draw attention to this figure down at the bottom here because, it's well understood that college can be and frequently is very expensive. What is not as well understood is just the sheer amount of financial aid dollars that are available every year. So in the most recent year that we have data for, $177 billion in financial aid was granted. And that's not atypical. That's about what it usually is. And so there's a lot of money available in financial aid, and most families will be eligible for some level of financial aid. So I just like to remind people of that because it's true. We've already talked about this a little bit, but there are two ways to award financial aid. The first is that we're going to talk about is merit-based. So merit-based, it's not based on your finances. It's awarded in recognition of student achievement. Something that the student has done. So think about scholarships. Think about academic scholarships, athletic scholarships, artistic scholarships, whatever it may be. It's money granted to the student based on something that they've done. Typically, this comes from the colleges. So everything that the federal government does is not merit-based. It's need-based. Most of what the state does, again, not merit-based. So this really comes from the colleges and outside scholarships as well. But I think it's more important to talk about the colleges because this practice really varies from college to college. So some colleges give out a lot of merit-based scholarships. Some colleges don't give out any merit-based scholarships. So it really depends. It's something that you can ask a college whether or not they do merit aid or not, and they'll tell you. And the thing is, you need to apply every year for financial aid, and every year you'll get an offer. So if you see a scholarship on your financial aid offer from a college, find out, is this renewable from year to year? Okay. And then if it is it in the same amount every year? or are they different amounts? So some are front loaded for freshman year and they get less later on. And then if you can qualify every year for it, what does the student need to do to continue to qualify? So is there a GPA that the student needs to maintain? Is there some other requirement that the student needs to maintain to continue to qualify for the scholarship? You want to make sure that that's the case, because typically, as long as your finances don't dramatically change from one year to the next, your financial aid should be similar from one year to the next. The very few times that I've had parents call and say that they got much less in financial aid than they did the year before, it's because a student didn't meet the requirement to renew their scholarship. So you don't want that to happen. Now, also, is we're going to talk about the financial aid forms and how to file them. In addition to those forms, colleges may have their own separate scholarship applications on their website. So just check the websites, make sure you know what forms you need to file in order to be eligible for financial aid and when you need to file them. And that's something that I'm going to sort of keep hammering throughout this presentation. But that's merit-based financial aid. Most financial aid, though, is not merit-based. It's need-based, and it's based on the family's financial eligibility for it, or their financial need. And so how they determine what your financial need is are those financial aid forms that you need to file. So, you put in your income and assets and some other information as well. And that goes through a formula. It's the same standardized formula for every family that goes through it. And they come out with a number that, the formula determines you can pay for a year of college. And we'll, again, talk about that in more detail later on. But just that sets your eligibility for financial aid. And examples of need-based financial aid include grants. So that's sort of the need-based counterpart to scholarships. It's gift aid is taken off, so you get a grant. Loans, so those federal student loans, the subsidy for them at least is based on need. The availability of the loans themselves are not based on need, but the subsidy. And then work study. So as I said, most financial aid is need-based, but in order to continue to qualify for it, the student does need to continue to make what's called satisfactory academic progress. So they have to, meet a certain academic benchmark as certified by the college that they're continuing through their program and getting their degree in some kind of a quick fashion for them to continue to qualify for need-based financial aid. Okay, now finally we get to the application process. Again, I'll say it, check deadlines and required applications on each college website. So this is one of those few times I feel like in life that a deadline is a hard deadline. You don't want to miss it. Every college that you're applying to, if you want financial aid, is going to want a FAFSA. So they'll all have their FAFSA deadlines. In addition to that, they may want other forms. Just make sure you know which forms the colleges require and when they require them. So if you miss a financial aid deadline at a college, you probably won't get financial aid from that college. So you don't want to do that. Now, you should be working on the financial aid application concurrently with the admissions application. So don't make the same mistake that at least one family makes, I feel like every year, which is they apply for admission, wait to hear whether or not they were admitted, and then go to apply for financial aid. If you've done that, you've probably missed the deadline. So again, you should be working on them around the same time. There are different timetables that you can choose to be on for admissions and financial aid. So there's regular decision. If you're applying regular decision to a college, you probably have until February or March to get that application in, or those financial aid applications in. Certainly the FAFSA deadlines are probably in February and March if you're going to regular decision. But you can also apply early action or early decision. And so what that means is that you're applying earlier and your admissions deadlines then need to be met earlier. So they probably have earlier deadlines to file for admission. And if that's the case, then they most likely have earlier financial aid deadlines as well. So you just want to make sure you, again, are aware of that. The difference between early action and early decision is worth talking about for a minute. Early action simply means that you're applying early and you want to know early whether or not you've been admitted. And that's really all it is. Early decision is what's called a binding agreement. So that's you're applying early to a college. You want to know early whether or not you've been admitted, but you're also telling a college that if you do admit me as a student, then I am committing to attend that college. So save a spot for me. Now, a lot of people don't apply early decision anywhere, but early decision carries some responsibility with it, right? So if you are making that commitment to a college that you are committing to attend, if they let you in, that's really a commitment you can only make to one college. So you should only be applying early decision to one college. And you're making this commitment really before you see a financial aid offer. So you want to make sure that you really want to go to that college and that it's a college that you can afford if you are even if you're not getting the financial aid offer, if you don't get the financial aid offer that you assumed you would get. Now, there are some ways to estimate what your financial aid offer would be, and again, we'll see those later on. So you just want to be careful, be aware of the difference between early action and early decision, and just be intentional as far as that's concerned. Again, I feel like I've said this 3 or 4 times already on this slide, but you want to meet application deadlines. We do have a college application manager on our website. You can download, print off, and it'll say, college, FAFSA deadline, CSS profile. Do they want a CSS profile, which is that second application? And what's the deadline there? So you can keep track of what you need to do and when you need to do it by. Okay, the FAFSA. As stated, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It is required by all colleges. So, if you want aid, you need to file that FAFSA. It's how they assess your eligibility for aid from the federal government as well as the state. And most colleges base their financial aid, their need-based financial aid, solely on the information that you put on the FAFSA. So it's something you need to complete every year if you want aid every year. It's available at FAFSA.gov on December 1st. So typically it's available October 1st. Last year, as I said, because of the overhaul, it wasn't available until December 31st, and then with a lot of problems. So this year it is December 1st. So 2025 high school grads will do the 2025-2026 FAFSA. So if you're a senior this year, that's the one you'd be doing. And the FAFSA, the people who file the FAFSA are contributors. That's the word that's used. So a student is a contributor to the FAFSA, and every parent who's listed on the FAFSA is a contributor. And each one has a separate section to file. So typically the student begins the FAFSA, they complete their portion, and then they send an invitation to the parent contributors to proceed. So the last person to complete the FAFSA submits it. Incomplete FAFSAs are deleted after 45 days of no activity. So once you start a FAFSA, you have 45 days to file it. If it's not filed by 45 days, it's deleted and you need to start again. We have an Understanding the FAFSA webinar that you can watch prior to filing the FAFSA if you want to do that. But really, the most important thing that you should do before filing the FAFSA is get your FSA ID. So what that is a username and password for a contributor to begin the FAFSA and to file their portion of the FAFSA. So you have to have an FSA ID to even log in. So it will take 2 to 4 days to get one of these FSA IDs. So it's something that you can do right now. And essentially what it is, you go on, it should take you about 5 minutes. You create a username and password. Whatever you create is going to be tied to your date of birth and your social security number, if you have a social security number. So it's going to be specific to you. And it's going to be the same one that you're going to use year after year. So if you're a student, your FSA ID that you get is going to be the same one that you're filing for next year's FAFSA as well. Same thing with a parent. Now, I said social security number. You don't actually need a social security number to get an FSA ID, which is good. But you do have to have an email address. And so who needs an FSA ID? As I said, the student needs an FSA ID always. And then most of the time, at least one parent needs an FSA ID. If it's a dependent student, a traditional sort of undergraduate student going to undergraduate school, they're probably going to need to list parent information on the FAFSA. And that means at least one parent will need an FSA ID. Now, how do you know if one parent or each parent needs an FSA ID? It depends on the parent's marital status. So if it's a divorced or separated, parent situation, and the parent who's going to be filing the FAFSA is unmarried, then it's just one parent who's going to be filing the FAFSA. They need their FSA ID. If parents are married, but they didn't file their taxes, married filing jointly, then both parents would need an FSA ID. Or if they didn't file, both parents would need an FSA ID. And as I said, you don't need a social security number, but you need to answer questions from credit history if that's the case, that you don't have one. Now, what actually goes on the FAFSA? So it's sort of general information about the student, including their student citizenship status. So in order to be eligible to receive aid from the federal government, you need to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, or an eligible non-citizen. So there are certain categories of non-citizens who are eligible for the FAFSA, but they're fairly narrow categories. For undocumented students, they're not eligible for aid from the federal government. Whether or not they're eligible for aid from the state government depends on the state. We'll talk about some programs, but students may be eligible, undocumented students may be eligible depending on their circumstances for some in-state for financial aid from the state of Massachusetts and in-state tuition. But at the federal level, students need to be U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. So that status needs to be reported on the FAFSA, and the student needs to list all the colleges that they are applying to. And there's space to list 20 colleges on the FAFSA, so up to 20 colleges. Students need to put their information. Parents need to be listed most often on the FAFSA as well. So which parents need to go on the FAFSA? All married parents, so including same-sex parents, both of their information, their income needs to go on the FAFSA. In the cases, all parents who live together, whether they're married or not. So it's the same situation as families sort of intact and always has been or whatever. It's that the parents have not ever been married. Then both of those parents are listed on the FAFSA. In the cases of divorced or separated parents, they want the information from the parent who has provided more financial support in the last 12 months. And if that person has remarried, then it goes to, then their current spouse needs to be listed as well. So again, this drives all sorts of questions as to how do we determine, who's provided more. This is something that they want you to figure out as families. They're frankly not going to go sort of digging around to see if you're who really provides more support. The guidance that we get is, because I know a lot of divorced parents do their best to keep things 50-50 on purpose. So the guidance really was, it could be, I decided that I paid for an extra cup of coffee over the past 12 months. That makes me the parent who provided more than 50% of the student's financial support. If the parents provided equal support and you can't determine who should file, then you're supposed to use the parent with greater income and assets. But they want you as a parent, student, as a family, whatever it may be, to figure out which parent that is. Legal guardians are not considered parents on the FAFSA. So that means a student would be an independent student and not list parent information. You're to list the number of people in the household that will pull from the IRS, but if that's not accurate, if not everybody is reflected on the taxes that way, you can update that. And the number of children in college will be asked about, but frankly, it will not factor in the decision to how much you can pay for a year of college. Now, that's who needs to go on the FAFSA, but what do they list of you on the FAFSA? So your financial information, right? So, and there's two main categories. There's parent and student. And within those two categories, there are two main categories in each of those. So there's parent income, parent assets, student income, and student assets. So for income, they're looking at the past, not this year that's going on now, but last year, the year that you've presumably filed taxes for already. And so this is why they are looking for income from, in this case, 2023, because you probably have filed taxes already. And so what they can do then, as long as you give consent, which you must if you want financial aid, is to go in and pull that information in from the IRS directly to populate the FAFSA. So you don't have to go and look at your taxes and try to find the right line to answer this question, etc. Most families will be able to use this. They call it a data exchange tool. So both taxed and some untaxed income will be counted, the ones that appear on the tax return for both the parent and the student. When it comes to assets, I think we should start by saying what is not listed as an asset. So for parents, the value of your retirement is not listed as an asset. The family's primary residence is not listed as an asset. Life insurance is not listed as an asset. What is listed as an asset are things like what's in your checking and savings account the day you file the FAFSA, any value of investments, businesses, farms, second property that you might own, other property other than your primary residence, all that stuff gets added as an asset. If you have education savings accounts like 529s for your kids, those get added, although only for the student that you're filing the FAFSA for. So if you have 3 kids, 3 different 529 accounts, and you're filing a FAFSA for your oldest, you just put the balance of what's in the oldest child's account. Child support received is listed as an asset. Now, this is, again, what they ask for, income and assets, not debt. So debt is not reported except when you're calculating an asset. So, for example, if you own a home, a second piece of property, for example, that has a $500,000 market value, but you owe $250,000 on it, you would subtract that from the $5,000 and list the value as $250,000. So that is where debt shows up. Now, this is probably a good time to talk about too. The FAFSA doesn't really ask about a lot of things, right? It asks about income and assets, and that's it. So if there are things that need to be known at the college level, make sure you tell the financial aid office, especially if it's not asked on the FAFSA and is going to negatively impact your ability to pay. Now, as I said, the FAFSA goes everywhere, to every college. Many colleges, though, want, in addition to the FAFSA, an additional form called the CSS profile. This is for mainly private colleges require the CSS profile. Certainly not every private college, but of the colleges that do, and there are a few hundred throughout the country, they're usually private schools. Now, they may want this because they give out a lot of their own money and they want more information than what the FAFSA can tell them. The first big difference between the CSS profile and the FAFSA is that it is not a free form. So it costs $25 to file the CSS profile to your first college and then $16 to each additional colleges. There are fee waivers available. So if parent income is less than $100,000 or the family meets certain other criteria, you're not going to have to pay to file a profile. And that'll be built into the process. So they'll be able to tell, obviously, if they're asking for your income, what that is. This, unlike the FAFSA, is available right now for students next year. So if you are hearing about the FAFSA and thinking it's not available until December 1st, so I don't have anything to do until then, look at your colleges and see if they also want a CSS profile. If they do, you can file that now. And the profile is a longer form. They want more information than what the FAFSA will ask for. So you may want to start it earlier. A couple of other big differences between the profile and the FAFSA. So the profile probably will ask about the value of your primary residence. They will ask about retirement accounts, perhaps. So they want more information. The other thing is, in the cases of divorced or separated parents, colleges, I think, typically want non-custodial parents to also file a profile. Now there's waivers that you can apply for that. So if it's a situation where there's really no contact between ex-spouses, or if there's some sort of safety issue, make sure you appeal to the financial aid office about that. Ask for a non-custodial waiver. It'll be the college's decision whether or not they grant that waiver, but it is something that they can do. We also do have a what to know about the CSS profile webinar, so you can check that out. In addition to the CSS profile, there may be other applications that are college specific. Again, you just want to make sure that you know which forms are required at the college and when you need to file them. So after you file, the colleges and the state or the federal government will receive that data electronically. In the case of the FAFSA, the student will receive a FAFSA submission summary emailed to them. So that's their sort of, okay, you filed a FAFSA, everything is good, you're finished with what you need to do. Colleges may request additional documentation. We'll get to that in a second. But then the colleges actually just review the information on the financial aid forms and determine the financial aid offer. So the financial aid may be sent with the admissions decision or sometime closely after. Now, verification is if the college reaches out to you and they want you to provide some extra documentation. So this could be for a few reasons. It could be that they have a question on something to do with the information that you put in the FAFSA, or the FAFSA and the profile information maybe doesn't add up, or it could be random. So sometimes colleges just randomly select a certain percentage of students to go through verification. So they'll be very specific as to what you need to get them, which forms you need to supply them so that they can have their questions answered. So just make sure that you're reading email, that you're opening mail. If there's a portal that you're on, and there probably is, make sure that the student or you are up to date on the messages that way. They could be asking for things like a tax return transcript. For example, if you weren't able to use that data exchange from the IRS, some families are not, they will probably want you to provide one of those. They may have questions about account statements. They may need you to file a verification worksheet. Whatever it is, just make sure you are in touch with the college quickly and get them what they need, because they won't be able to finalize the financial aid offer until they have that. And again, this leads us to another broad point. I think the broad point number one is to not miss any deadlines. Broad point number two is that the financial aid office is a resource for you, and you should contact them with any questions. So again, if there are things that are not asked about on the financial aid forms, but that the college needs to know, then reach out to the financial aid office and tell them that. If there has been a change in circumstances since you file, that is going to impact your ability to pay, reach out to them and let them know of that. You can call them, you can email them, you can stop by if that's offered. Ask about special considerations. Ask if you can appeal your financial aid offer. So you get your financial aid offer and you want more. Can you appeal that? How do you do that? What's the best way to do that? I'll just throw in that we have a webinar on that every year in the spring. So, and it is attended by directors of financial aid at Massachusetts colleges, and how they handle that process. So you may want to take advantage of that. Okay, so how financial aid decisions are made. Once the college has all of your information, how do they determine how much financial aid you're eligible for? So to figure that out, we have to think about two sort of metrics, so like the two pillars of financial aid. One of them is cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is what it's going to cost for everything for a year of college. So that is tuition and fees and food and housing. Those are what's called billed or direct expenses. We know exactly what they'll cost. They show up on a bill and you know what this is for, and you know exactly how much it is. And then there is another type of expense that is not going to show up on a bill that way, but it's something that you are going to have to pay. So books and supplies, transportation to and from college, and living expenses at the time. And that's going to be different depending on the type of student or the individual student, really. But cost of attendance should be listed on is listed on every school's website somewhere. So it's going to be different at every college, and it will be different for different types of students within that college. But that's the important thing, because that sort of sets the cost. So cost of attendance is one pillar of financial aid. The other one is the student aid index. And what this is the result of all that information that you put into the FAFSA or the CSS profile. After it goes through that formula, what's left, the number that they feel you are responsible for as a family, is this student aid index. So again, it is the same standardized formula for every family. They go through the same thing. And within that formula, you should know that income weighs much more heavily than assets. And I say that because I know a lot of families get concerned about assets they have saved for college, and they might want to sort of explain it or move it, or they get very concerned. It's fine, but assets account for a very small portion of this overall student aid index. Parent assets count for 3 to 5.6% of the asset will go towards the student aid index, whereas parent income, they'll take a look at anywhere from 0 to 47% of your adjusted gross income, and depends on how much you make. Those are the FAFSA, that's the federal methodology. And I think the CSS profile, even though it's a proprietary formula, my understanding is that it's similar. So yeah, that's the federal methodology. Colleges might use an institutional formula if they require the profile. You can go to an SAI calculator on MEFA.org right now. That's what that image is. And spend 5 minutes and find out what your student aid index is and how much that formula is going to expect you to pay for a year of college. But that number, the student aid index itself, is not necessarily what you'll pay for college. So if you see $10,000, you think, oh, okay, so I'm supposed to pay $10,000 this year, so that's what I'm going to pay. That's not exactly it. In fact, it probably isn't that. It's think of that as more of a floor than a ceiling. So we'll see why in just a minute. Basically, the student aid index is important because it's a part of this financial aid formula, which is the cost of attendance at a particular college minus your student aid index is your financial aid eligibility. So think about what it costs at a particular school minus what you're responsible for. Everything in the middle, the difference of that is what you're eligible to receive in financial aid, but not necessarily what you'll get. So here's an example. Let's say this particular college has a cost of attendance of $45,000 and the family's student aid index is $5,000. So again, you might go through that formula and say, oh, great, I'm going to pay $5,000 for college. Well, the first thing, we've got to fill this barrel. It's $45,000 deep. The first thing that goes in is the family contribution here, which is $5,000. So we've got $40,000 left. Because that's our eligibility, right? Because cost of attendance minus SAI is your eligibility. So we're eligible to receive $40,000 in financial aid. So we have grants and scholarships, $27,500. Remember those federal student loans? The freshman year loan limit is at $5,500. So we get that. We've got a $2,000 federal work study offer, but that's all we got. So we didn't get $40,000 from the college. We got $35,000. So what we're actually responsible for is our student aid index of 5,000 plus our unmet need of 5,000, so 10,000. So even though you're eligible, and it's good to have a low student aid index because it makes you eligible for more financial aid, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get all the financial aid that you're eligible to receive. And in fact, it's more common that you don't get all the financial aid that you're eligible to receive. You can still get a lot and you might get it all, but it's more common that you're not going to be what they call fully funded up to need. So that's your student aid index. You can go and again at MEFA.org do a student aid index calculator. But if you want to take it a step further and see how much aid you're actually likely to get from a college, every college is required to have on their site a net price calculator. And it's similar to this SAI calculator. You go in, you spend a few minutes putting in income, asset information, number of people in the household. Depending on the college, colleges will have different net price calculators. So some may ask you, especially if they do merit aid, about GPA or maybe standardized test scores. You can put those on. And it should give you an idea of what your financial aid offer will be from that college and the resulting balance. So it just takes it a step further. I think this is a useful tool to use. It's an estimate. It's not set in stone, and it's only as sort of accurate as the information that you put in. But I think it's a good tool to use if you're at the point, especially if you're looking at colleges or looking at college types, to get a feel for how much aid you may be eligible for at particular colleges. Now, when you get your financial aid offer from colleges, even though you may have the same eligibility at 3 different schools, you're not likely to get the same exact offer at those 3 schools. So we see an example of this here. College A, B, and C for unmet need. You're fully funded up at College A, which is great. College B, you're $7,000 on, you've got a $7,000 gap there. And College C, a $15,000 gap. But where it gets interesting is that even though the sort of sum of financial aid that you get at particular colleges may look the same, it's important to look at each line item, because you see here in this example, college A, B, and C, they've each given you $5,000 of unmet need, or so it appears. College A, though, you can see you get $27,500 in grants and scholarships. Again, the best kind of financial aid that there is. College B gave you $10,000 less than that, $17,500. And College C didn't give you anything. So where is that difference made up? It's made up in that third, the parent loan. See, some colleges package a parent loan in with their financial aid offers, and it's kind of a controversial topic in financial aid. But you just want to make sure you know that if you see a parent loan, that's typically a federal loan called the PLUS, stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. And there's nothing wrong with a PLUS loan. It's a fine loan. It's a reputable loan. It's a good loan to have, perhaps if you need one. But it's not financial aid. It doesn't have those benefits that make the federal student loans financial aid. And also, you weren't granted it. The parents need to apply and be credit approved for a PLUS loan. So just make sure you take a look at those line items when you see your financial aid offer. Now, when it comes time if you have an offer there and you need to pay a balance due, well, once you have a balance due because your aid has been granted, there's really only 3 sort of avenues that you can go through to pay that. So past income, present income, and future income. So when I say past income, I'm talking about savings. So in this example here, we have a $20,000 balance due. Student savings, let's say students have worked a summer job and they have $1,000 saved up. That's great. In this example, parent savings, parents have $4,000 they can put, which brings us down to $15,000. And that brings us on our list to present income. Present income meaning the wages that you're earning while your student is in school. I don't know of many folks who can pay the balance due with just whatever is left over after they get finished paying for everything else in their paycheck from their paycheck. But it is good to pay what you can, even if it's not the full amount, to maximize all this stuff before you get to borrowing. So in this example, we have $5,000. And so it says parent contribution to a payment plan. Now, a lot of people don't know that colleges often work with outside providers to offer interest-free monthly payment plans. And so you can sign up for these plans and for a small fee, and you can decide what you can pay every month, and that monthly payment will go against tuition, every dollar of it. So let's say here, parents have decided that they can afford to pay $500 over 10 months. That's $5,000. And what we've got left to borrow is $10,000. So we could have borrowed the full amount of $20,000. But by maximizing the savings in our current wages, we brought that down to $10,000. And this is important. I know $10,000 is still a good size loan to have. But think about this. The student already has their own federal student loans that they're solely responsible to repay. Any other loan after that is going to have to be, the approval on that loan is going to have to be based on credit or credit approval and credit and income approval. And most students are not going to be able to meet those requirements without a co-applicant. And typically that means a parent, although it doesn't necessarily have to be. So that means any parents or anybody who's watching this who may be a co-applicant on a loan would owe this $20,000 or $10,000, depending on the route that you go here in these examples. And I've talked to many parents over the years at MEFA who have called up because we're lenders, right, at MEFA, and they would say, I know I'm the cosigner, but it's not really my loan. It's really his loan. It's really her loan, whatever it may be. But if you're the cosigner, you're responsible to repay that loan. And just again, knowing really, really rough estimate, $20,000, a monthly payment on that is about $200 a month. Whereas the $10,000 would be $100 a month. And again, not a small amount, either one, but this is year one of college. So if you're going to be borrowing this every year, that's a $400 a month monthly payment versus an $800 a month monthly payment. So that's going to add up. And that brings us to what we call kitchen table conversations. So conversations to have before you make your decision, important conversations that might be uncomfortable to have, but should be had before you make your decision. So you can look at what the net price is. So what, after all is said and done, is each school going to cost you? How much of that do you need to borrow? What is that times 4? Can you handle that monthly payment comfortably? Can you not? If you can't, what are some options? Parents and student going to split costs? Would starting at a community college save significant money? Certainly it would, especially since we have free community college in Massachusetts now, which we'll get to in a minute. If you're parents, again, consider the number of children that you'll send to college. And also think in terms, once again, of total debt, not just the year in front of you, but 4+ years of school. Is graduate school part of the conversation? Are you comfortable taking on this level of debt? Think about the career that the student is going to be entering if they are lucky enough to know what they want to do. So maybe it's a career that will pay them a lot of money right away out of college. If that's the case, you may not mind spending or borrowing a good amount. But if not, maybe it does matter. If you need to make a cost, if you need to make a choice based on cost, it's better to do it at the beginning rather than in the middle of a college education. Now, as far as paying for college in Massachusetts is concerned, there's a whole bunch of new programs, as I mentioned earlier. There is a Mass Aid portal, so you can go in and see all of your financial aid from the state. If you have any, you may not have any. But as far as some of the new programs that can help students and families pay for college in Massachusetts, there's a new tuition equity law, which allows some undocumented students, and not just undocumented, but some that are not eligible to receive federal aid. You may not be undocumented, but you may be in the process of getting your citizenship and ineligible at the time. Some of those students can receive Massachusetts state aid to go to public colleges in Massachusetts. They need to meet certain requirements, but it's called the tuition equity law, and that's something new this year. There's also Mass Educate, which is free community college. That is free tuition and fees, not necessarily books and equipment, but tuition and fees in Massachusetts, which is a huge development, and it just started again this year. So would starting at a community college save you money? I can't imagine how it would not. Mass Grant Plus, which is an expansion of the Mass Grant program, which is a piece of need-based financial aid, gift aid from the state of Massachusetts that will offer free or reduced tuition and fees for low and middle income students and a potential book allowance. So this is tuition and fees, and also you can qualify for a book stipend as well. So this will really help students go to a 4-year public college in Massachusetts for much less money, sometimes free. And there's a program called Mass Transfer, which predates all of these free programs, which is if you're starting off at a community college and you want to use the Mass Transfer program to guarantee those credits to transfer over to a 4-year public college in Massachusetts, you can do that. There are tiers to that program, so you can qualify for tuition freeze while you're in school, as well as a tuition rebate if you maintain a certain GPA. And then there's the tuition break program, which means if you want to study at a public college in Massachusetts to keep your costs low, but they don't offer your intended major, well, if they do in another public New England college, you could go to that program for a reduced rate. So there's all sorts of options that are new and expanding throughout the state and through New England. Now, I said we were going to talk about some free resources. There's something called FAFSA Day, which is a series of events held virtually throughout the winter, the fall and winter, where professionals sort of log on and you can come on and you'll get assistance filing your FAFSA. So hopefully, I know I've done it. Jen has done it many years. Jen is on the committee for it. So we've helped a lot of people file their FAFSAs. Hopefully, you can get on if you're having difficulty and we'll be able to complete the entire process. But if we can't complete the entire process, hopefully we can get you past the sticking point that you're on now. So if you want to go to fafsaday.org and research when those events are, there are several centers throughout Massachusetts called Educational Opportunity Centers. There are 6 throughout the state. Massedco.org is the website. There's the headquarters is in Worcester, but I know there's one in Boston, there's one in Worcester, there's one in Chicopee, there's one in Springfield, I believe. So they're kind of throughout the state, and hopefully there's one close to you if you need assistance. And again, MEFA Pathway is our college and career portal. It's a free resource for anyone in Massachusetts to use, to keep track of searches, to search for scholarships, to file applications, and to create resumes, among other things. So for the seniors here, what you're thinking about now is, or should be, if you want to retake the SAT or ACT for a better score, you should be getting your letters of recommendation. You should be basically finalizing your applications to college and researching your financial aid applications as well. And if your grades throughout senior year are going to bolster your case to be admitted to your colleges, you can keep the colleges informed of that. Again, you can keep track of things with MEFA. If you sign up for MEFA emails, they'll send you 1 or 2 a month to let you know of deadlines that are coming up and things that you should be thinking about. As the time goes on, we do have, and you start getting your financial aid offers and your decisions from colleges. We do have a Paying the College Bill campaign, which is something like this, or in-person events as well. We encourage people to actually bring their financial aid offers, and we can sort of help compare them because it does get confusing when you're looking at them. It gets confusing to look at one, but when you're looking at 7 or 8, it's just sort of figuring out what each one means and how they relate to one another can be difficult. And then you need to deposit at a college by May 1st. So we take it one step at a time. You're going to be fine. You're going to get there, but you will have questions probably throughout, and we'll be here to help you with those. So what you can do now, get your FSA IDs, research deadlines and required applications, and this is the QR code for our service, some of our services here, webinars, reference MEFA's timeline for college admissions and financial aid, and signing up for emails. Now, if anyone is here and has questions, I know Jen has probably left us. Here is the information, but I will be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. I know it's 1 o'clock, past 1 o'clock, so. Do you recommend everyone fill out the FAFSA and or CSS profile even if your income is high? I would say, so the only reason that I typically tend to recommend it, the only thing is, I know this is it can be a question for families if filing for financial aid impacts negatively your admissions. And yeah, that depends on the school. Some colleges are what they call need blind, which means that admissions office and financial aid office don't talk to one another, so admissions doesn't even look at that. Some are not. I would say if you need financial aid, you should file for financial aid. Because if you need it, you need it. And it's not just the filing itself, and in any event that is gonna impact you. Um, so I think if you need it, I would apply. Um, and typically income is part of it. It's the most important part of it, sure. But especially if college is at a really high sticker price college, that means that they have more room for eligibility. So my default is typically to apply for it, but it's a question I think that might vary a little bit depending on the circumstances and depending on the colleges. So it's a conversation that you can have with the admissions and financial aid departments of the colleges. But as I said, my general idea is to apply. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, you'll be getting this recording and the slides as well. Somebody's got okay. Yep. All right. Thanks. Good luck to everyone.